Welcome back to Dateline New Haven on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the stories, behind the headlines and the stories that make our community tick. Here's the man that always knows what's ticking and managed to get everybody mad even when they agree with him, John Velleca, the criminal justice expert, resident criminal justice expert on WNHH FM. He's the retired chief and assistant chief in New Haven, a bunch of other places, some live free or die place in New Hampshire. He's a professor of criminal justice at Albertus, sergeant at arms at the state senate. Did I mention everything?
Yeah.
I didn't mention how often you go to the gym.
Daily, yes.
And daily
Retired.
at the gym. Okay, I'm going to remind you to get close to that mic. So, John Velleca, I want to have you, as usual, help us really understand all the craziness going on in criminal justice right now, crime, and how the system deals with it. But first, I wanted to ask you about the wacky story that lasted about 5 minutes yesterday. John Hinckley Jr.
Yeah, I saw that.
He was in New Haven back, you remember, in 81. He was stalking Jodie Foster. She was a Yale student. He was mentally ill. He wanted to impress her. He had seen Taxi Driver, seen her in Taxi Driver.
Right.
And so he wanted to kill the president, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And he actually did shoot the president and get him pretty bad, but he did survive. And Hinckley was released from federal custody after 40 years at a mental institution. And now he's become a singer-songwriter.
Right.
And to be fair, and I'll be mean, because I do think it's fine. People get over mental illness. They find art music. There is -0 chance anyone would listen to his music except that he's John Hinckley and he's infamous.
Right. Yeah.
So now he's going on a tour. He sold out a venue in New York, small venue, and he got booked for the Space Ballroom in Hamden. Mm-hmm. So tickets went on sale the other day. He got big on social media for a few hours yesterday, which is Wednesday if you're listening to this on a replay. And then within hours, because of the outrage, the promoters pulled the show.
Right.
It's not the most important stories we've had around here. It's like people get shot now these days. But what'd you think about that?
I thought that was I think that trying to become famous over shooting the president, I'm not. I kind of lose a little outrage at it too, to be honest with you. The only, like you just said, the only reason he's even thought of was because he did something terrible.
I mean, he was playing a basic GCD chord song he wrote that was like he could strum, but we couldn't really play enough that you'd ever pay.
Right, that's you could
remotely
get his music.
The only reason you would listen to it is because he's John Hinckley.
Right, then I would disagree with that.
What if he were awesome? What if he what if he had a talent because of his imagination or whatever to write really meaningful music and said, I spent 40 years in the system, did my time, I'm not a threat anymore. I struggle with mental illness, which a lot of people do.
Right.
And I'm coming out of the right side of it by trying to find my voice and maybe be better for society. Would that
I think that would make a difference, sure. Yeah.
I mean, he says he's doing that.
Well, I mean, I haven't listened to him, so
it's not. You don't need to listen to him.
Okay, so then he's not getting booked because.
So I think that's what it was. So they felt the
talent.
promoters are the ones trying to make a buck on his infamy.
Sure, of course, and that's the moral dilemma there. That's why why would you do that? Why would you pay to see that when that's what's
So
going
you
on?
weren't going to go.
No, I was not going to go.
You got any live music lately, or
what's that?
You got any live music lately, or
no?
Okay. There have been some great shows at Cafe 9 lately. But anyway, the big news that had a lot more import, and it isn't just a 20-minute news story, has been the ongoing fraction. This is about the next police chief.
Right.
So we haven't had an official police chief for more than a year. Yeah. And it was an interim name, became an acting, and under law, that could only be acting for 6 months. Right. Got turned down by the Board of Alders because they're like our Congress. They get to say yes or no to a nominee. And then this crazy thing happened where the mayor kept that person who was rejected in office for a long time and is slow walking this, quote, search process that if we did everything government that length, nobody would ever work, a street would never get swept and whatever. But he broke the charter pretty clearly. The charter, his argument, City Hall said, is that if I give a nominee for an office and it gets turned down, that means I get to have the person in the job forever because I fulfilled the requirements of submitting a name.
Right.
Now there was a lawsuit against it, and he lost in court this week. A judge thought that was a completely ridiculous argument.
Yeah, it is.
Illogical was the word. I mean, and Tom Breen was covering the court hearing for. I said the judge was kind of stunned. Like, you're arguing to me that under the charter, if it says you have to submit a name for approval and it's rejected, then you can indefinitely keep that person in because you. And their argument was because the charter doesn't spell out, hey, people in power, don't be dishonest jerks who defy what we're meaning here and use that as an excuse on a technicality because we didn't spell it out, not to keep someone in a job forever that's been rejected. Therefore, it's vague and we can do this.
Right.
What was your read on that?
I think we talked about this when it first happened. I agree with that. I think that, remember back when we were talking about, whether how to enforce the law, so to speak, when officers are when there's a statute, let's say that's ambiguous, you look to the genesis for the statute. Why was the statute created? What is it meant to do? And then you would enforce it based on that. So if you put it in that light, well, what's the idea of the confirmation by the alders? It's so we don't have somebody in place.
It's still stated by a lot of people, public life, of different backgrounds. They think it's outrageous the alders said no, like they didn't have a right to. People defended what the Velleca administration did in a very questionable legal move,
right,
saying it was the alders who were wrong for exercising their legal right.
No, I don't.
Can you help me understand that?
I don't understand. I think that there's a lot of visceral responses going. I think a lot of people are taking this a lot more personal.
They think it was unfair she got rejected.
Right.
They think even though nobody ever said the chief should be not white.
Well, there are racial undertones to that.
There are big racial issues.
Yeah.
The racial issues were people felt this department went back 40 years on racial issues. There were no longer any top cops of color for the first time since 1994. That's a racial issue. There were disciplinary proceedings going on where all the black cops who messed up got very strong discipline, and white cops who were higher ranking and messed up got no discipline.
Right.
So yes, those are racial issues. Those were issues at stake.
But there's also, when you stand up and you say, we want a chief that looks like me.
No, that's not what they said, though. That's the thing.
Furlow said that.
They said an assistant chief.
Well,
everyone has left that part out.
I understand.
Furlow, everybody who is black who opposed that chief pick has said the chief does not need to be black.
All right, my point is this. You shouldn't be saying that about the assistant chief, the chief, whatever. The optics of that are bad, even though maybe that's not what you meant. Maybe
but they
it
got
was
spun.
a poor choice
People
of
are
word.
lying about what he said. He never said the chief should look like him. He never said it, and everyone is quoted that to say he did.
He said we need somebody that looks like us.
Somewhere in the higher ranks of police department.
You're adding
No,
that.
I was there. I watched what he said. He never said the chief.
No,
he said
he didn't say
chief.
somewhere.
He said assistant chief.
The quote I read said, we need somebody that looks like me.
In the assistant chief.
And that's things in quotes. He said that.
Well, the sentence before, we have no assistant chiefs of color, no captains of color. This is the first time, and it happened suddenly, and there's no plan.
I don't remember reading.
And every speaker, right, because everyone just wanted to focus in to make it about that. So everyone there for the chief. So you have a crowd of cops who are only white. You had cops who are only white in that room.
Listen, I get that you're walking it back for him, but he said
I'm not walking it back.
Of course you are.
You're taking what he said out of context, John.
No,
If someone says
listen.
says 3 sentences and you pull out one to make it mean what you want it to mean.
Right.
He said 3 sentences. There is nobody anymore of color. Right. Nobody in any high rank. We have no plan for this chief to bring someone of a higher rank. When I go in there and there are no assistant chiefs
Let me
of
ask you a
color.
question. If Renee Dominguez is a black female, do they do the same thing, or do they provide her with the plan to develop people?
She would have had a plan.
No.
She
You
would
don't
not
know
have
that.
cleared house.
You don't know that.
She would not have cleared house the way she did and demote the black-headed detectives who was very well regarded and put a white person in there with less experience. She would not.
Well, you
would
also
have not had the exodus.
You're taking things out of context, but you're doing that too. You're not remember saying that the one is a sergeant, one is a captain. There's a very big difference there, right? So maybe she's taking a sergeant out of a position that's supposed to be a captain and putting a captain.
Who
in
said
a
it's supposed to be?
position.
There's not been. You had that position. You were not a captain. You were the chief detectives. You were not a captain.
I was the chief of detectives. You're right, but before that.
Was Tony Reyes, who was not a captain? Oh, he was after you. I don't think in this century. I don't think there's been a captain in that job in this century.
No, before Perf came in and the whole Billy White deal, a captain always had that division. What was Sullivan? And it was
he left last century.
Right, all right. But you understand?
I'm talking 21st century, John.
Okay, okay. I'll try and keep up.
You're saying it's this precedent that always has to happen, but it hadn't happened.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying
and plus,
is that,
why is that important? Why is rank important rather than someone's
rank
good
is
job?
completely important.
You don't have to be a captain to become the assistant chief.
No.
Archie Generoso was white.
No,
he was a
wait
sergeant,
second.
became assistant chief, and no one bothered with that. No, it wasn't suddenly all the white cops were saying,
first of all,
we got to go by rank.
First of all, that's an aberration. That shouldn't have been done. Okay? And I don't want to get into getting personal about Archie, but there are reasons why he got that position other people didn't. Okay? That never happens. A sergeant has no business going from a sergeant to an assistant chief. I don't care what you can argue with me till you're blue in the face. It shouldn't happen. It should never happen. Because the management that you need to develop as a manager from lieutenant to captain, or at least lieutenant, excuse me, the job as a sergeant is completely different.
Okay, you were arguing against John Velleca the last time he was on the show. You said that testing is so rigid that you don't believe people should go down by line by what numbers people get on a test. We should find who's good at a job and find talent and promote them.
Right.
So sometimes someone doesn't get a promotion because they were 0.03 points behind someone on a test because they're not good at doing a test, but they happen to be great at solving crimes and working with the community, and you would like the latter person to get ahead. But
Right.
now you're telling me you have to promote everybody in order by who got promoted on a test by number.
No, that's not what I said. What I said was you can't go from a sergeant, a frontline manager, into an executive command position. That's what I said. It has nothing to do with testing. You're the one bringing up the testing in the list. I'm not bringing that up.
You brought it up last time.
Well, we're talking about
So the
something
way you
different
get
this time.
those ranks is through testing.
No, the way you get through ranks is through testing. Oh, that's true. But you need a position where you're overseeing other managers. A sergeant doesn't
that
do
is a different point, John. You're saying you need experience having tell 10 people what
Right.
to do and keep track of them, and then 20 people what to do
Listen,
before you're
I,
charged over
I held
100.
I held every one of those positions. I could tell you my job as a detective supervisor was much different than my job as chief of detectives. All right? It wasn't the same thing. And the fact that I was good at being a frontline supervisor in detectives didn't help me at all. when
So I
became
see your
executive
argument.
command.
So in this case, in the Detective Bureau, they took someone who ran a district, a community policing district,
Right.
would have 2 cops on at a time to keep track of, leapfrogging over someone who'd been running the Detective Bureau for years and doing a really good job with
Right,
a
but
larger
what you
group.
don't see on the daily basis is...
But you're
is-
saying it's because he had some title
he's
on a
in-
test.
No,
should
not
have
some
been there.
title. His daily duties are to administrate and manage people. The sergeant doesn't administrate anything.
But the person who had been in that job was doing it with
I'm
more
not.
experience.
Listen, I can't go by what New Haven Police has done. The police is.
No, at the time when that decision was
Listen,
made, someone was demoted who had more
I'm
experience.
talking
doing
about
it
the
than
real
someone
world.
had less because he was white.
I'm talking about the real world, what's really supposed
And
to
the
be
real
done.
world, the white people get put
Hold
up, and
on.
everybody
Let
gets
me
knocked
let me
out.
talk. Okay. The New Haven Police Department is not managed or staffed like a normal organization. Nepotism has destroyed that place. Okay, you get jobs because you're friends with somebody or because somebody likes you. It's not the way it should be. All right, so you're talking about putting a captain at the head of a division. A captain is supposed to be in the head of the division because under the captain. So what happens? Here's an example. Take your sergeant, your superstar sergeant that is so good that he gets to be an assistant chief. All right, because he doesn't need to be middle management or executive manager because he's this good. All right, so we put him there. He's a sergeant. Now, what happens when his lieutenant in charge of narcotics? He has a problem with the lieutenant in charge of narcotics. And he says, hey, you can't do this. And the lieutenant says, you know what, go scratch your ass. I'm a lieutenant. Now what do you do? What do you do? What does the sergeant do? Tell him, listen, don't you know how good I am? They put me here?
Do they really say go scratch your ass?
I would say go scratch your ass, sure.
Well, we're doing that on Dateline New Haven at WNHH FM 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. What would you do right now? First of all, we now have an illegal police chief. She's defying a judge. And the mayor is defying a judge, just like George Wallace and Lester Maddox at the door. They're not going to. We have basically a white supremacist law enforcement organization that's not willing to do anything a judge has ordered them to do. And what would you do?
The looks of that are not good. They should immediately comply with what the judge stated. To be honest with you,
Why do you think they're not? That's what I can't figure out.
because now it's a personal thing. It's a pissing match now.
Yeah, but they run a city and a police force. Who cares about the personal thing?
Well, they do obviously.
But how does that help their personal advancement in their careers by being outlaws?
Well, it doesn't help it at all. It's not. It doesn't.
But help me understand it in an intelligent way.
As far as the mayor,
And the police chief. Like if you were the police chief there
Well,
and
the
you're
police chief is
retiring
gonna,
anyway, why would you hang on like that?
I mean, you got to ask her that. I don't know. I wouldn't. To be honest with you, once they put me up the first time and they turned me down, I would have left then. I mean, I don't see the reason to, but I don't think it advances any. It doesn't serve anybody well right now that you're defying a court order. It doesn't look good at all. What the message you're sending is that we don't have to listen to orders. We don't have to, follow the rules, and that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you're worried about the message that you're sending to the rank and file with everything else, but then the message you're sending right now is not a good one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they should work on, and it's not personal. Like I said, I like Renee. I have nothing. I'm just saying that the ruling has been made by a legitimate court. I mean, you have to.
Although
adhere
you have a legal right to appeal, which they are.
right. Well, I mean, what's
Also,
going to happen?
I never understood why the suit that led to this ruling about the police chief shouldn't be in there. Why it was filed against the police chief?
That's a good question. I don't know, Paul.
Because it's the mayor who's defying the charter and the law. the police chief isn't doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to understand why she's
I wondered that from the
there.
beginning, to be honest with you, too. I didn't
But
no
we're not
idea that
lawyers,
she was,
even though we pretend to be some. But you're actually the criminal justice expert for WNHF-HFM. John Velleca here is helping us run down the news. So you teach these days at Alberta. You're teaching next generation of cops, right?
Next generation of criminal justice professionals.
So who are they?
Like,
in other words, are they going to be cops? Are they going to be prosecutors?
Some want to be cops. Some want to go on to law school. Some want to. A lot of them want to work in juvenile probation. That's a big one for whatever reason.
Do some of them want to be cops?
Yeah, a lot of them want to be cops.
Because you're kind of at the front line there of what careers people are choosing to go into. Who are the
Right.
people who in another time and place would be cops?
Yeah.
Now, there's one positive aspect when you mention prosecutors. A lot of police reform people have said, instead of us fighting with each other, let's just get more kinds of people going to the prosecution. Like, be a prosecutor in life, and then you can help try to do things justly and make those tough calls. But what about cops? Are fewer people wanting to be cops? Is this true, what we're hearing? Like, who wants to be a cop, and how are they feeling about it?
I ask them that question. They don't. The kids don't seem to be affected, so to speak. They want to be police officers, and what's going on nationally, they're of the opinion that they can have a positive influence there. So I don't think it's detracting anybody. I think it might be detracting the people that don't feel they can do the job, with such heavy oversight. And that's a good thing, obviously.
So, in other words, you're saying people who want to go in police work for the wrong reasons, like beat the crap out of people and get away with it, will not be police officers. But I thought it was wider than that, because I thought a lot of people going to. Most police officers I know are terrific, and they're good people. They want to do the right thing. They might work in a system that leads some get the crap to do the wrong thing or not get the right training. But I think. Do you think that there are people who, in another time and place, might have wanted to be a cop, but then look at how the profession is viewed and would be hesitant, or is that just theoretical? You're not seeing that on the ground.
No, I do.
People of all backgrounds were proud to become cops.
Right.
They were proud that you're risking your life for law and order and protect the community. That's public service.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise I get is that when we usually take, every class, we will look at a body cam video or one of the controversial videos, and we'll critique it and we'll talk about it. How many of the kids are pro-police? And these are our kids, from New Haven, community kids. They're not against the police like you would think. A lot of times I'm the voice that's against the police, critiquing the police, and they're the ones making the case for the police.
That's so interesting. Can you think of an example?
I put up Cole not too long ago.
Sergeant Cole, who you and I have disagreed with. He's the guy who would have been our Derek Chauvin, who was beating the crap in the head out of an unarmed mentally ill man who called the police for help because of a rent dispute, and was destroying him until another chief was so scared of what she was seeing that she stopped him. This police chief elevated the officer who almost killed him and made the beater into a sergeant, and they threw to the ground the woman who risked approbation from her colleagues for calling it to account. But I don't remember you seeing it that way. I thought you said he did what he had to do, and sometimes it's ugly how you have to do police work.
Yeah, I don't think, we're on opposite sides to this. I definitely don't think that it was, the crime of the century the way
No,
portrayed.
but it got held up as the right thing.
The
argument that this police chief made was that it was justifiable for him to do it. He had a reason he felt he had to do it.
It was justifiable.
She never said it was necessary, which is what the entire rest of Connecticut's police departments have decided should be the standard.
Well,
she never even said.
I get where you're going.
That she never even said, John Velleca, it's not just semantics. It's like you can do whatever you want as long as you can justify it. Versus, let's try, separate from the issue of discipline, let's try to find what you need to do and find other ways of dealing with situations so you don't almost kill somebody until the cop steps in.
Listen, I would say I can't speak for what Renee thinks, right? That's
but it was stated, it was debated at the police commission.
Right.
They said the rest of Connecticut, the chief of Milford, who's head of a state organization, said, I can't believe Connecticut, New Haven just said an officer did what he did was fine because you can justify it, because the rest of us have switched to a new standard that it has to be necessary, not justifiable.
Well, I'm going to hold.
When you and I might agree that the cops shouldn't have even been disciplined. What struck me,
when the chief of Milford holds his officers to that standard, then we could talk about that. But I'm not going to even touch that one.
That was through the statewide standards group post. They had decided the new standards should be necessary, not justified.
They're talking about what we should do as opposed to what we could do, and that's talk right now.
But what about when you're looking at a situation like this when a man could have died,
right?
And why can't you say, separate from the issue of discipline? A lot of people would agree that Justin Cole was in a tough position, and maybe you don't have to discipline him or fine him.
Right.
But why can't the department say we'd rather that isn't how it ends up?
Yeah, I mean,
we'd rather figure out a way that you don't just do everything you could justify, even if it's shooting and killing a mentally ill person like another cop did and got away with. But why don't we just say let's look at situations and admit sometimes we didn't handle it in the ideal way and learn from it.
And I agree with that.
We did the opposite here.
I agree.
We did here. The chief dug in, the department dug in,
right,
and they said what he did was fine, and no support for the woman who was a young cop who was brave enough to step in and stop New Haven from having a Derek Chauvin, George Floyd case.
I mean, you're really going deep on that.
I am going deep, and I've drawn Cole. You draw
a comparison.
I am totally. He was on
I'm
his
not sure
head.
if I agree with that.
He was at the head with the punches. The guy had no ability to stop it. He was creaming him, and he wasn't stopping. And the cop was scared. And like the cops in Minneapolis, she stepped in and risked herself, and she's gotten zero support from this department.
Here's what I say, and I understand where you guys are coming from. But what do you do? This guy is fighting them. He's kicking them. He's already refused. He's not going. He's a sizable guy. What do you want the cops to do?
Okay, here's what I want to do first place. If you're called for a guy saying I need help, they want to evict me, and he's mentally ill. That's not a police call.
How is he mentally ill though? He's mentally ill because he says he's mentally ill.
No, I've talked to that guy for hours. He's delusional. He thinks that things are happening in front of his face that aren't happening.
Listen,
I've talked this. I know the guy. He was definitely, and they knew it. And they knew it. If you look at the IA report, they knew they were dealing with a person.
All right. So what did they do from that point forward?
It's tough. But
time out. What do you do?
You
call
don't
the mental health
them.
professionals, and you know what the mental health professionals say? Get it under control, and we'll pick it up.
No, when you have an eviction issue, and remember, he was the guy who called the police.
The eviction issue. Here we're going to go round and round. The eviction issue got nothing to do with nothing.
That's why they were called. He said they're kicking me out.
No, they're called because he's in the common area.
No,
and he
was.
They
weren't in the common area. They were they went up to the fifth floor.
They went up to the fifth floor. On his request, he wanted to get something out of his office.
And they brought him down to the common area.
He was in the common area before because he'd been locked out of his office. Right?
So they went upstairs with him. So when there's an eviction, every time there's eviction, you call the police?
Every time there is an eviction and you won't vacate the property, yes.
They have a process. They have a process with a they lock the door. They have a marshal or sheriff. They used to be called sheriffs to come bring it. Having police, Justin Cole was put in a very tough position. And I don't think he should be fired for it. He was in a tough position that he escalated.
Listen, let's say this. This guy has done more than enough to be under arrest. Can we agree there?
Who?
Marshall.
No. He called the police because of a rent dispute. He wasn't doing anything illegal.
No, he called the police because he had a problem with his eviction. But security called the police because he wasn't leaving the lobby. Mm-hmm. Right?
And security complained. The security guard filmed it and said, "You cops are killing him."
I
spoke to the security guard.
I understand that.
It
That's irrelevant. But first of all, the cops are not killing him. The point is that's
because the cop stepped in.
You can't take you can't take everything to the highest level of mortification. Like the guy got punched in the face.
No, he didn't just get punched in the face.
He got punched in the face a couple times
repeatedly, and he got stopped before he was pounding the hell out of the guy.
So, should he use the taser on him?
Maybe he shouldn't have gotten to that point.
But
John.
If he uses the taser, you guys will come in and say, "Oh, he's tasing."
No, he shouldn't have gotten to the point where he's wrestling with someone in a rent dispute who called for help. And that's why I'm saying it isn't.
You know what I
discipline.
say about this?
It's what
you guys, they're taking applications. Go put one in. You go put the badge on. You go down to Long Wharf and you show us all how to do it.
Thankfully, it wasn't at Long Wharf, but thankfully, I would not do that because I wouldn't be good at the job.
I understand. The cops make mistakes, and me and you go back a long way.
And that's all we say. I don't want to hang this guy. Okay.
Do cops get a free pass with me?
Mm-mm.
Okay. The same way, if I'm sitting here telling you that would I like this scene to be different? Of course.
So why couldn't they say that? Why couldn't they say we want our department not to end up
in a
violent situation with mentally people who call us for help?
No, you should really, if you wanted to comment on it, you should say, listen, we'd be happy if we never had to use force.
But they did the opposite.
Right.
They didn't say that we could have looked at this as an opportunity to see how we could police differently with mentally ill people. We have a history of this. We had a cop who was left on the force who did shoot dead a mentally ill person in a situation that he escalated, and we have to deal with this.
I agree with it 100%. And I agree with what Mello said out of Milford as well, that we should be, and I said on the show a bunch of times before in the past few years, we should be talking about what we should do, not what we can do justifiably, right? Mm-hmm. But now we're making that switch to that now, and everybody's being forced to make that switch, right? Because whether the chiefs of police were not on board. Don't forget the chiefs of police. They found this kid in Northfield. They arrested him. What about the guy in Wethersfield that happened just before that? It was
I don't know
worse.
which case you talking about?
The cop ran in front of the car and fired into the car, shot the kid, and killed him. He was justified with that, though. So we're all over the map here. And that's the problem. There's no one universal
One thing
set.
you said is true. It's very hard to be a cop. That's why I'm thinking we shouldn't be punishing always the cop or being mad at the cop, but we should be honest about how, like every other profession, policing requires constant examination of how to do it better and admitting where it doesn't turn out the way you want.
Transparency, right?
Yeah.
The public wants, that's what they want. When I was any position of anything,
You're
right?
totally transparent.
That's all they wanted was transparency.
Yeah.
You want cameras, you want body cameras, you want updates, you want information. Okay, well, understand something. Policing at times is an ugly business, right? Let's just say this. Has there ever been a police shooting that's been justified?
Yes.
Okay, so now if you watch that police shooting that is justified, isn't that going to be unsettling to you? Just a person getting shot?
So I wanted and I've actually written extensively about police who've shot people. And I've concluded there are times I would do it, and I'm not a cop. And there are the times I said, I asked them why they did it. And I think that the issue is that we don't get mad at the cops, but that we be honest about looking at how we could have done it differently so we wouldn't have that result. We're not there,
I am
John,
on board with you 100%.
but we're not there, John.
I
This
agree with
Cole
you.
case,
I
just
agree
like
with you.
with this legal ruling suit with the chief wasn't the problem, the mayor's the problem. Just like in the Cole case, it wasn't Cole who's the problem. It's the department that can't.
It's a culture, right?
That it's a culture that then the people in charge, instead of looking how to do things better and seeing it as a sign of weakness, to re-examine how you do your work,
I agree
makes
with
us
you.
all less safe.
And you are correct. Instead of circling the wagons, it should be time where you open the door and take some dialogue. I agree with you 100%.
So we agree. So why
Eventually, we always get to this point.
Then how do we spend the whole segment arguing?
Well, we usually do that, and at the end we agree.
Okay, I like that. John Velleca, the criminal. That's why you are the criminal justice expert of WNHHFM, and I hope they know that in the criminal justice world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they do.
That retired police chief, Alberta's criminal justice professor, State Senate Sergeant at Arms, John Velleca, is the criminal justice expert
for the
WNHHFM.
NHI, yes.
Thank you and also thank you for your comments in The Independent. You sparked some great debates, and next time we'll talk about that. Thanks for joining us, John Velleca,
Anytime.
on Dateline New Haven. Thanks for listening. We're going to take a break before we get to New Haven Pundits running down other stories from the week. And this is Paul Bass inviting you to listen to Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from their CD, A Plea for Peace.